Good evening. I'm Suzanne Shirley, and we are doing tonight the 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth, Chapter 8, The Law of Pain. I'm a senior Ruby ambassador with Plexus Worldwide. We have been studying John Maxwell's 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth. It's been an absolutely, I would say, eye-opening, revealing of how far we have to go. That's what it's done for me. If you're watching and you're on the team, if you're on my team, if you're on any team in Plexus and you happen across this video, please know that you can learn from this series yourself while watching, reading the book. You can actually, I think, download this book for free online in the PDF version. You can get it in the, you can get it on audio. You can, I don't think it's for free on audio, but you can also download the ebook version for your Kindle, your iPad, and they have deals on this particular book quite often. It's one of his most popular books, John Maxwell's books. One thing I want to talk about real quick before I get started, I want to make a point on, is that when you are doing a book study, and you have a team in Plexus or any tech team in network marketing, you can learn with your team as you're teaching. So let's for an example, that say that you find a really amazing book that you want to read yourself. Well, why not teach it to your team at the same time that you're learning the information? And I think that that is a highly valuable lesson that can be learned. You don't have to know it all in order to be a leader. You don't have to know everything to lead your team. And I want everybody that's on my team to understand that as I teach tonight. You know, yes, I've been a teacher by trade. Yes, that's my vocation. Yes, that's my skill set that I bring into it. Am I passionate about learning and personal growth? Yes. You too can be the same way. You just need to be a chapter ahead. You know, I've told this to all of my teachers that I have mentored, that have come into my building, that I've mentored over the decades. I have told them, look, you are still the most knowledgeable person in the room. Your students don't know that you just started teaching a few weeks ago. So as long as you know more than they do, you have a degree, you're 2 chapters ahead of them in the book, you have just prepared lessons that they haven't even looked at, you still know more than they do. And so when I say that to say this, that no, you don't know more than your team knows. That's not my point. My point is that you know enough to lead your team. You know enough to take what we're doing here and to duplicate this with your team. So I don't want you to feel like, okay, well, she's doing something I can't do. Yes, you can. All you do is you read a chapter like I've done here. You highlight the things that you want to talk about. You share the concept, read the concept, and share your take on that concept. You cover the main points and you have a discussion. And that's really all that we're doing here. I want everyone on this team and anyone else who's watching this to understand that you can too lead your team in a book study. This is something you can do. It is not beyond your reach. It's not something that you need massive skills for, okay? You can study right alongside your team. And that's what we are all doing. I happen to be the leader of the team, but I am also down in the trenches with the team. We are learning together as we go. So I want everybody to just know that, okay? The law of pain. Good management of bad experiences leads to great growth. So how do you deal with your pain? How do you deal with things that happen to you that are beyond your control? And that is a huge essential question that all of us need to ask ourselves. John McDonald said, every problem introduces a person to himself. You really do learn who you are. You learn who you are and what you can and cannot tolerate when you deal with adversity in your life. When something happens to you or your circumstances change and you're brought through a really hard, rough place in your life, you really start to learn what you can actually handle and who you are as a person. So do you explode in anger? Do you shrink into yourself emotionally? Do you detach from yourself, from the experience as much as possible? Do you ignore it? Do you shove it under the rug? Each time that we encounter a painful experience, we get to know ourselves a little bit better. Pain can stop us dead in our tracks, or it can cause us to make decisions that we would like to put off, right? Some of us just put off making a decision. We don't want to have to deal with it because it's too painful. Deal with the issues we would rather not face, and make changes that make us feel uncomfortable. We don't want to make changes that make us feel uncomfortable. Pain prompts us to face who we are and where we are in life. What we do with an experience defines who we become. What we do with an experience defines who we become. Because really what we're doing here is we are becoming. We are not staying where we are in life on this path. We are on a journey and we are becoming better versions of ourselves. And if we are not pursuing that growth, then we are not just coasting. We're going backwards. If you're not trying to go up the hill and fight off and fight the demons inside of yourself, whatever they may be, and to become a better version of you, you're not just staying where you are, you're actually declining. You're going back, you're backsliding. So I wanted to make that point. And then John Maxwell uses the example of the wife of a guy named Tom McGinnis, who's an American Airlines Flight 11 pilot who flew in, I think it was to the Trade Center, one of the towers on September 11th. Her name is Cheryl McGinnis. She wrote a book called Beauty Beyond the Ashes. And she said this: as unfair, unreasonable, and impossible as it seems, we still have work to do after a tragedy occurs. We still have roles to fill. We still have responsibilities to family and others. The stuff of life may pause for a while, but it does not stop. Fair or not, that is the reality. Cheryl went ahead and fulfilled her role with determination and strength. She planned Tom's funeral, her husband. She spoke at the funeral even. She, which was way out of her comfort zone, might I add. She took care of her children. She started running her household as a single parent. And she rapidly began to learn how to deal with the difficulties of being a widow. Each new experience became an opportunity for her personal growth. She said this: I am learning more each day. The circumstances of 9/11 have forced me to examine who I am, to face myself in ways that I never had to before, to ask, what does God want for me? What can I do in Him by His power within me? How will He use me to touch others? I am learning more about myself and about God. Of course, how in the world, in fact, I bet you she learned more about herself and about God because of this tragedy, this horrific experience than she ever had before. It's incredible how the greatest trials and the greatest pains of life bring us closer to God and teach us more about who He is, and teach us more about who He wants us, what He wants us to learn about ourselves. It truly is amazing. She said, I am learning it on my own, not through Tom's filter, because he was her protector. He filtered a lot of these things. She didn't even realize until Tom was gone how lazy she had become. Before, she had depended on him to prompt her own growth. Now she was taking responsibility for it her own self. She grew the most. One of the areas that she grew the most in was in public speaking. She became a grand public speaker. Out of the rubble that day, she said, I can emerge to say that I am stronger today than 10 years ago. Wow. Stronger today than 10 years ago when her husband was alive. Wow. Look at the perspective that she has on that. Look at the strength of character that it takes to have that attitude. With the complete knowledge that her husband is no longer here, she says she's stronger today than when he was living. That is very noble and very admirable, if you ask me. That's what can happen when a person manages bad experiences well. That shows the power of the law of pain. just tonight we saw on Facebook, my husband knows this one guy that he used to work with at a company that he used to work at, a guy that was a really good friend of his, who's now a police officer that was killed in an accident over the weekend. And he was off duty. He was riding a motorcycle, and he was killed by a truck that ran over him that didn't even see him. And his wife is on our big team, on Perfectly Plexus Dream Team, and she has 2 children. They're both teenagers. I mean, I cannot even imagine the pain that she's experiencing right now. I mean, I can't fathom it. I can barely fathom the edge of it. How is she going to deal? But one of the scriptures, she posted a scripture on the timeline when she talked about the tragedy, and she shared it with her Facebook audience. And she said, and Jesus said unto them, with man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. You know, what a perspective to have, that already and of course she's going to struggle, and she's going to cry bitter tears, and she's going to be angry, and she's going to blame him for owning a motorcycle. She's going to go through all the phases of grief. And she's going to be so angry that she has to face life without him and make decisions without him and raise their children without him. But to already start off with the attitude of that God has this whole thing in his hands. Wow. I mean, that shows who she is. It reveals her character. You know, I'll tell you a personal experience of mine. Recently, I went to my dental hygienist, and I was sitting in the chair getting my teeth cleaned because I go twice a year. And she just happened to mention, she's like, well, you know, and the guy that I'm dating right now, blah, blah, blah. I said, whoa, what? You're dating somebody? What happened? Did you get a divorce? I was blown away. She's like, oh, Suzanne, did I not tell you? I'm like, tell me what? What happened? And she's like, all right, I didn't tell you. And I was like, what happened? And she said, my husband committed suicide 2 years ago. And I mean, I said, stop, like, stop doing my teeth. Stop now. I'm like, what happened? What? I'm like, how did you come to work every day? I mean, what did you do? And she said, okay, I'm going to tell you everything. Can I do your teeth? I'm like, yes. I was like, well, I don't want to make you feel like you have to tell me everything. If you would rather, she's like, no, I'll tell you everything. I've come to the point where I can say all this stuff. I'm like, what did you do? Do you know what she told me that she did? Was she devastated? Yes. Did she have a breakdown? Yes. Did she melt down a lot? Yes. Did she think that she couldn't make it? Yes. But what did she do? The very first thing that she did is she took her grown children and she pulled them upstairs in a room when all this chaos was going on, and they had all learned of what had happened. And they were all in town the weekend that it happened because they had all moved on. They have families. They live elsewhere. And she pulled them into a room by themselves without their spouses. And she said, I want each of you to look at me. She said, you will not hate your father. You will not blame him. You will love him. You will understand he was very broken, and you will forgive him. I don't care what you have to do. You will go to counseling. I'll pay for it. I'll do whatever I have to do. But he will not break up our family. You will not let what he did break up our family. She was strong. I was bawling. I'm like, how can you do my teeth right now? How can you do my teeth? And it's like people who have a center grounding, I really do believe it's not just people in God, but I think the most common are the ones who have a personal relationship with Christ. The ones who know that they know the Father, and they can go to him and they can trust on him. Even though they can't see him, they know he's real. They know he's not dead in a grave somewhere. And they can talk to him, and they know that he has their whole lives in his hands. And they know that he knew and even had the plan of all this, of what was going to happen when it happened, and that he allowed it to happen. And they can trust in him that because of all of that, they can move forward. So the people that I see that are the most grounded are the ones that have a personal relationship with Christ. So I'm going to stop all this to say this. If you don't know Jesus and you want to know Jesus, you need to just text me or call me. I can be found on Facebook. My phone number is on Facebook. It's under my profile section. I would love to talk to you. This chapter is on pain. We all have vast amounts of pain in our lives, things that happen to us that we can't rationalize. We don't understand. Do I have the answers? No, but I know the one who does. I know the one who does. And I can point you to him, and I can show you him. I can show you who he is. So all I am saying is that when you go through pain, you can't stop. You can't stop fighting the good fight, and you can't just shut everything down. You have to move forward. So I wanted to give you some examples from my own life. I wanted to give you an example from something that's happened recently, and obviously Cheryl McGinnis, what an incredible example she is. What I know about bad experiences. What does John Maxwell know about bad experiences? What separates people who thrive from those who merely survive? What separates them? John Maxwell says, I believe it's how they face their problems. 3 things about bad experiences. Here's 3 things. Everybody has them. That's number 1. Everybody has bad experiences. Nobody gets to escape them. Nobody does. And Dennis Holy said, expecting the world to treat you fairly just because you're a good person is a little like expecting the bull not to charge you because you're a vegetarian. Like you're not going to eat the bull, so why would he charge you? You have to be realistic and have realistic expectations when it comes to pain and problems. Good people have really bad things that happen to them. Really good people. You can't avoid them. It's inevitable. But you can't go around expecting the worst thing to happen to you. You can't live in expectation of it. You have to have a positive attitude. You have to be optimistic, and you have to trust in God that he has your life in his hands, that no matter what happens to you, that he will get you through, and that he has a plan for your life, a plan to prosper you, a plan to make you whole, a plan to better you, a plan to make you prosper. So please know that. Number 2, nobody likes these painful experiences. Nobody does. Dustin Hoffman described what it was like for him and some of his fellow actors the early days of their careers when they were struggling. You know, we see Dustin Hoffman at the height of his career. We see all of these actors that are at the pinnacle of their success. They get all of these amazing roles, and they do such incredible things with them, right? But here's what he was dealing with. You know, if anyone had told us that we would have been successful, we would have laughed in their face. We were anything but successful actors in those days. I was a waiter. Gene Hackman was a mover, and Robert Duvall worked at a post office. You know, we didn't dream of being rich and famous. We dreamed of finding a job. It was a time of terrible rejection, and we hated being rejected. It got to the point that we used to leave our 8x10 at the door of the casting agents. We would knock and run just so that we wouldn't have to be rejected face to face again. So it was so discouraging that I seriously considered quitting and becoming an acting teacher at a university. What a terrible travesty that would have been. Dustin Hoffman is one of the greatest actors of our time, right? So, number 3, few people make bad experiences positive experiences. I'm going to say that again. Very few people make bad experiences positive ones. Very few. So what do you think that says? There's a lot of people with a lot of hurts and a lot of pain walking around in the world, and they don't know how to deal with it. So they are negative, and they are bitter, and probably very hateful, and are enraged, which is the last stage of bitterness. When you're so bitter like that, you become enraged. So life's difficulties do not allow us to stay the same. We can't. They move us. The question is, in what direction? Which direction will you be moved? Will you be moved forward or backwards? Are you going to become bitter or better? Better or bitter? Do they limit us or lead us to grow? So when tough times come, many people do not respond well. They don't. And some seem to have the motto that John says, I once saw on a bumper sticker, quote, when the going gets tough, it's time to take a nap. You know, sometimes I wish I could take a nap when things were really rough. I'm so stressed out that I can't sleep when things are bad, right? Everybody reacts to pain in a different way. John talks about his pain file. You know, everybody has a pain file. What is your pain file? I would strongly urge you to do what John has done. He wrote down his pain file in this book. He talked about the pain of inexperience when he started out in his career, the pain of incompetence. He was incompetent. The pain of disappointment, that people just disappointed him over and over, and that he couldn't understand that these people were going to disappoint. Okay, so on and on. He has this pain file. What is your pain file? Have you taken some time to analyze your life? What is your pain file? What are you going to do in response to your pain file? Are you going to allow it to make you bitter? Do you have some areas in your life that you just can't get past? Can you just not let them go? Can you not forgive some people? Can you not forgive yourself? Perhaps that's the case. I challenge you, and I encourage you, and I urge you to sit down and write out your pain file. Okay? We all have one. Do you want me to share a little bit of mine? I'm not here to just go off on myself here, but I have a pain file too. I was raised by a single mom. My dad left my mother and myself when I was an infant. I thought I had this great childhood, but really I lacked a father. And then the first thing I did was I became obese. I started eating like crazy, so I became a food addict. I was raised that way. And I thought it was just normal to do that. And so I fought with food my whole life. That's a pain file. What else? The very first guy that I met outside of college charmed the crap out of me and said I was the thing that hung the moon. And because I had no father, but I was subconsciously didn't understand all this, I married the man who was so abusive to me. What a pain file that was. You know, that was one of the hardest experiences in my life. I had to get away from that. I had to get away from a man who promised me everything and was becoming a doctor. He was almost a doctor, and he was going to give me everything I ever wanted, but he was going to control me and manipulate me and keep me under his thumb and abuse the living crap out of me. So I had to escape that. So then I was like, what is wrong with me? Why would I allow this in my life? And what I turned around and did is I said, why did I tolerate that? And then I went looking for the answer to that question. And I went and got myself involved in counseling and uncovered all of this stuff in myself. Like, okay, you were raised without a father. You had no father figure. You were looking for male acceptance. Many of these different things started to come out. And I discovered these things in myself. Heart attack, marriage problems. When I married my husband, Tom, we didn't know each other. We fought like cats and dogs. I thought I had made a terrible mistake. We met online. That's why we didn't know each other. And we ended up in counseling. We had money problems, massive money problems when we got married. I mean, what's your pain file? What's your pain file? We all have a pain file. And guess what? There's going to be more where that came from. But we can't sit around and just wait for the next bad thing to happen to us. We need to have a positive action plan. We need to have something in place to where when that thing happens, we have a center we can go to. We have something that will ground us. We have someone who will hold us and keep us and shelter us and protect us from the storm. In the midst of the storm, we can go through the storm and not try to avoid the storm, go around the storm, or dig under it. We have to go through. And I really do believe that we need to analyze our pain file, we need to write it down, and we need to come up with a plan of action for how we are going to deal with these things when they happen to us. Wanting everybody to be happy and making tough decisions were incompatible tasks. I learned that good leadership is disappointing people at a rate that they can stand. Wow. Wow. That's John Maxwell talking here. Wanting everybody to be happy and making tough decisions were incompatible tasks. They didn't mesh, right? So John says, I learned that good leadership is disappointing people at a rate that they can stand. You just are going to have to learn that you're going to disappoint people, but you're going to have to do it at a rate that they can tolerate. And that's really a huge lesson for all of us to understand. We're going to disappoint a lot of people. We are not going to make everybody happy. Everybody is not going to like us. I have learned that being a leader in this team. Not everybody likes me. And guess what? I have to be okay with it. I have to be okay if somebody on my team goes to someone else to get help. I have to be okay with it. What am I going to do? Allow that to derail my success and the success of this team? I can't do that. So what have all the painful experiences taught me, asked John Maxwell. He says, to let my discomfort be a catalyst for my own development. Growth is the best possible outcome for any negative experience. We need to grow in a positive way from our painful experiences. So what have all these painful experiences taught me? Growth is the best possible outcome for any negative experience. So 5 things. What are you going to do? Turn your pain into gain. How do you do that? 5 ways. Okay. Number 1, choose a positive life stance. I think I just basically started to talk about that before we got to this part. We got to have a plan, right? Got to have a positive action plan. Number 1, choose a positive life stance. You've got to be positive. Set your attitude, your assumptions, your expectations of people hold about themselves, other people, and the world in general. This is your attitude. What is your set of attitudes? For example, people's attitudes toward money, assumptions about their health, expectations for their children's future. Are they optimistic or pessimistic? Cheerful or gloomy? Trusting or suspicious? Friendly or reserved? Brave or timid? Generous or stingy? Giving or selfish? You've got to have a positive life stance. If you don't have a positive life stance, you're doomed to start out. Okay? John says, I came to develop this mindset by the way of the following thinking. Life is filled with good and bad. Some of the good and the bad I cannot control. That's just the way life is. Some of the good and the bad will find me. If I have a positive life stance, the good and the bad will become better. With a positive life stance, the good and the bad will become better. If I have a negative life stance, the good and the bad will become worse. Wow. Therefore, I choose a positive life stance. So to a large degree in life, you get what you expect. Not always, but most of the time. And if you have a positive life stance, you are set to come through the pain a lot better and not going to say unscathed or untouched, but improved. You will grow. You're starting off on the right foot, going through a trial, going through painful experiences with a positive mindset. And number 2, embrace and develop your creativity. He talks about the chicken farmer who had a bunch of chickens and the land kept getting flooded and all the chickens kept dying. So what did he do? He took lemons and made lemonade. He went ahead and bought ducks because ducks at least can swim. So the ducks aren't going to die. When the water comes and floods the land, he's going to have ducks that swim around. So there you go. Author Neil Donald Walsh asserted, life begins at the end of your comfort zone. You've got to start getting out of that comfort zone and take advantage of a painful experience. When you are going through pain, you're going through something that's taking you out of your comfort zone. Creativity begins at the end of your comfort zone. That's another thing about it. The secret to doing that is to use the energy that comes from either adrenaline or anger and use it to solve your problems and learn your lessons. Number 3, embrace the value of your bad experiences. Embrace that they have a value. Really embrace that concept. Think about that. That is so hard to wrap your head around, that your bad experiences have a value. There's value in bad experiences. They don't have to destroy you. They can make you better. So it's always easier to see something positive in a negative experience long after it happens, when it's over with, right? Hindsight's always 20/20. It's difficult to meet the negative experience in the moment with a positive mindset. Of course it is. All of us battle that, right? However, if you can do that, then you will always be able to learn something from it. And that at least we need to be able to do is learn from this terrible thing that's going on in our lives. Where there is no struggle, there is no progress. Facing difficulties is inevitable. Learning from them is optional. Learning from those difficulties is optional. It's up to us whether we're going to learn from them, right? I watched a documentary one time where this little boy had lost both of his parents, one right after the other. He had a dad that was killed in an accident, and then he was living with his mom, and she struggled to make ends meet, and then she was killed in another accident, and he was just 4 years old, and he went to live with his aunt, who barely was making ends meet herself. And everywhere that he met anybody, everybody was always sad and felt bad for him and was crying and was sad. Everybody that saw him was so sad. And he was tired. At 4 years old, he understood the concept. These people were miserable. And they saw him and thought, well, I'm just going to be sad for him. He was tired of that. And so what did he do? He took the little amount of money that he got for his allowance, and he went and bought a bunch of rubber duckies. And so he said, he told his aunt, I want you to take me everywhere today on a Saturday. And he did it every Saturday. He went around town, and every person that he saw that looked unhappy, he went up and said, here, this is for you. And he gave him a rubber ducky. And the person said, well, what are you doing? Why is this? And he said, you need to smile today. And you wouldn't believe the tears coming down the faces of these people, that a little 4-year-old boy wanted to give from his own life to make people smile. He was tired of seeing sad people. What a strength of character as a 4-year-old child. Can you imagine what that kind of kid that's going to grow up to be? I mean, God has his hand on that kid. That just really inspired me, that if a 4-year-old can do it, then adults should be able to understand at our age to be able to do it. Number 4, make good changes after learning from bad experiences. Novelist James Baldwin commented, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. How are you going to change anything until you face what it is? If you're always in denial, shoving it under the rug, how are you going to ever change it or move through it or get past it? You have to look at your life and see where you're at and see what the thing is and face it. And that is so hard for so many people. Okay, the law of the pain, okay? It gives us an opportunity to turn our lives around. A bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make the turn. A bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make the turn, okay? Most people don't think their way to positive change. They feel their way. They feel it. And your feelings can really get you into trouble. So you need to think clearly. You need to write down things. You need to have a positive action plan. You need to think clearly and become grounded and centered in the middle of your pain. When bad experiences happen and we have these strong feelings that are created inside of us, we either face those feelings and try to change, or we try to escape. We try to get away from it, okay? It's the old fight or flight instinct. We need to train ourselves to fight for positive changes. How do we do that? By remembering that our choices will lead to either the pain of self-discipline or the pain of regret. Our choices will either lead us to the pain of self-discipline or the pain of regret. So we either are going to discipline ourselves. I'm going to take an example here. Discipline ourselves to do our business, to be diligent, to fight adversity, to fight off mediocrity, to fight off laziness, to fight off procrastination, to fight off fears, to fight off the rejection, and do the work that it takes to become a better version of ourselves, or keep doing what we've done all these decades of our lives, punching a time clock, going in. I'm not saying anything's wrong with the job. People do them all over the place, right? We have to have jobs. Otherwise, we don't have planes and airports and taxi drivers and all those things. But what I'm saying is, we either, in our case of our business, we do the pain of self-discipline, or years later, we're going to look back and regret that we didn't do it. And we're going to have to just deal with that because there won't be an option to change at that point because all we're going to be having is our regrets. The next time you find yourself in the midst of a bad experience, remind yourself that you are on the cusp of an opportunity to change and grow. Whether you do will depend on how you react to your experience and the changes that you make as a result. Allow your emotions to be the catalyst for that change. Allow your emotions to be the catalyst for that change. Number 5, take responsibility for your life. Don't keep blaming everyone else and everything around you for the situation that's going on. So your circumstances do not define you. They don't define you. They are outside of you, and you need to not negatively they need to not negatively impact your values and your standards. And at the same time, you must take responsibility for your life and the choices that you make. Okay, Friedrich Flack, in his book, Resilience, and psychologist Julius Siegel, in Winning Life's Toughest Battles, indicate that people who overcome bad experiences avoid the label of victim, and they take the responsibility for moving forward. They do not just say, hey, what happened to me is the worst thing in the world, and I'll never be free of it. Instead, they say, what happened to me was pretty bad, but other people are way worse off than me, and I will not give up. Look for the silver lining, right? Always know that it's worse off someplace else. Trust me. There's worse things that are going on other places. So that's what I always like to do, is to saying, well, you know what? This could be worse. It could be, you know what? It always could be worse. It always could. So they don't wallow in self-pity and ask, why me? And that's a good thing, because it's one short step from why me to the next step, which is woe is me, which is self-pity. And that is a part, when you get to self-pity, you're not going to be able to turn around very easily. It's nearly impossible to grow in any significant way when you do not take responsibility for yourself and your own life. So no matter what you've gone through in your life or what you are currently going through right now, you have the opportunity to grow from it. You have the opportunity to grow from it. William Penn, an English philosopher and founder of the Pennsylvania province, said, this is going to encourage you. No pain, no palm. No thorns, no throne. No gall, no glory. No cross, no crown. And I really do think that I can't look at anything except for the eyes, the rosy glasses of Christianity. It's very hard for me to look elsewhere. Everything goes through that filter. And I think that Christ was the ultimate example of the agony of the cross and the example of living the life that he did, the flawless existence that he lived. He was the example of suffering and pain, and he had the attitude of forgiveness, and he had the attitude of long suffering, and he had the attitude of selflessness. On the cross, he looked at his mother and he said, "Mother, observe your son, and son, observe your mother." He was worried about his own mother when he was dying. He asked God to forgive everyone that had done the things that he had done to him. You know, he's an incredible example. And I think that there are so many others in this world that live a Christ-like example. We need to look to them as well. But I just really do believe that that is something that we can take as an ultimate example for our lives. Are we going to live up to Christ? Are we going to be the actual perfect example? No, we're going to have so many problems. We're going to commit many mistakes. We're not going to do the right thing on the way. But as long as we look to him as the ultimate example in our pain and suffering, and we know that in his suffering there was purpose. There was a grand purpose, and it was for the salvation of the world. And in our own suffering, we can know that it's not for nothing. Do you see what I'm saying? Your pain and your suffering is not purposeless. It has a purpose. You are suffering, you are in pain for a reason. And that reason we sometimes will never know. But we need to understand that God knows and He has control of it. But all we need to do is trust Him, know who He is, depend on Him, and do the things I think in this chapter that it lays out. Have that positive attitude, take responsibility, have a plan of action, and really face what it is that we're going through and don't make excuses. And we can overcome any adversity in our lives, and we can grow as a result. I'm going to end it with that. Thanks for joining us.